The Indigenous People of Biafra on Tuesday claimed to be in talks with the United Nations to hold a referendum for a sovereign state of Biafra. In a statement by the group's media and publicity secretary, Ima Powerful, the group is making efforts for the referendum any moment soon, adding that residents within the Biafra territory and those living beyond the boundaries of Biafra will be able to determine their own fate. The group expects the United Nations to supervise the referendum and are calling for freedom for all and not just for Biafrans alone.
There are different types of referendums. This ones are called independence referendums. And an independence referendum does not actually need the consent of the national government. What tends to happen is if there's some kind of separatist movement and that separatist movement gets support maybe at an election, they can now use that momentum to demand a referendum, not even of the national, or in our case, the federal government, just of their own people.
Okay.
They put a question on the ballot and people answer the question and they vote. And the United Nations will not call a referendum. Every country has their sovereignty. The United Nations will supervise, they'll observe if they're told to, they'll monitor a referendum if they're asked to. The United Nations is also relevant if the referendum succeeds and maybe the national government doesn't want to apply, the results of the referendum. The United Nations can come in and recognize that country as an independent country to give that referendum credence. So if at all the referendum does happen, if people vote no, then vote to be counted, then it's no and they stay in Nigeria. But if there's an overwhelming yes or a majority yes, then they leave. If at all the federal government allows it and the United Nations and the international community rally around the new state.
Well, they have claimed that it's going to be a peaceful process. I don't know how that's going to be, but I think that we can come back to continue on this discussion.
Now, the subject we're dealing with, basically, is self-determination. And self-determination, is an internationally recognized right by various UN conventions. Whether you're talking about Kosovo, or you're talking about East Timor, or you're talking about Cameroon. And it is indeed true that the United Nations can supervise referendums. The right of a people to determine their own future, to determine their own sovereignty. Now, two examples. In February 1961, the UN supervised the referendum to determine whether Northern Cameroon or Southern Cameroon would join Nigeria or join Cameroon. And that referendum was conducted. At the end of the day, when the votes were tallied, people can vote yes or no. At the end of it, Northern Cameroon joined Nigeria. Southern Cameroon, led by Ndeli and Co., joined Cameroon, the French-speaking Cameroon. Now, this was the decision over the British-occupied part of Cameroon at the time. In 1999, it was East Timor, and it was the president of Indonesia at the time who approached the United Nations to allow the people of East Timor to decide whether they would like to have special autonomy within Indonesia or have their own independence. And of course, they rejected special autonomy within Indonesia. In 2002, East Timor became independent on its own. And then you have the example of Kosovo and all of that.
We are alive, we are direct in Owerri. This is flyover, what a flyover. Or the flyover. We are alive, we are direct. Who is that hope? Who is that who cannot make noise? Any hope who doesn't make noise in Owerri? Or you will fire. Fire Sheba Gaga. And alive direct in Owerri. We are direct in Owerri. We are here direct in Owerri. This is flyover, or the flyover. This is or the flyover. And alive and direct in Owerri. Onye ya saya come to Owerri. Lo nya Owerri bu go awo. Saya get make noise in Owerri. Ele bu go awo. Ele bu go awo. Ke bu go saya get make noise in Owerri. Tonda ba wure lo nya awo. Ele o bu to saya get make noise in Owerri. Tonda ba wure le bo no. Tonda ba wuru. We are live and direct in Owerri. We are doing something with one mind. Nobody can stop us. Nobody can stop Biafra. Not even human being. Not even human being. Nobody will stop Biafra. 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 Not even their Supreme Governor will stop Biafra.